sure that my sister and I can become first-generation college graduates. That's not easy. I want leaders who understand what working-class families have to go through. Kamala Harris understands that because she comes from a working-class family. Look, Donald Trump was born on 3rd Base on 5th Avenue in New York City. He doesn't know the struggles of working-class people. He mocks us by doing photo ops at McDonald's. Let's be real. People work hard at places at McDonald's to put food on their table to make sure their families can get ahead. So in 7 days, let's send a message that America is a place for real freedom, and we're going to build a country that values every one of us and moves us forward. God bless you. Let's go win this election. Thank you.
Congressman Joe Walsh.
I'll start like I always begin. Give it to me. We got 8 days to go. Be fired up. It is so awesome to be here in Johnstown. I don't typically read from a script, but I'm introducing a pretty cool guy. So I want to make sure I get everything right. You all give me great hope. They introduced me as former Congressman Joe Walsh, left out one big important word. Former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh. A proud Republican for Harris. Something is going on in this country right now. I hope you can feel it. I feel it. Just spoke with former President Bill Clinton for a moment, and it struck me what's happening right now. Republicans and independents and Democrats coming together, right, to put their country first. When I was in Congress 10, 11, 12 years ago, if you would have told me I'd be on a stage in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Tea Party Joe Walsh introducing Democratic President Bill Clinton, I would have told you you're smoking something. But something is going on. I want us all to feel it because it's got to carry us to victory in 8 days. One quick thing about me, and then I'll get to our special guest. Not only am I a former Republican congressman, I voted for Donald Trump in 2016. I deserve that. My mom said, you've always been a little slow. It took me a while. Well, I tell you, there are a lot of us Republicans for Harris who did make that mistake in 2016. I was a Republican. He was my Republican nominee. I did what most of America did back then. Shame on me, bad on me. I voted for my team. I realized pretty quickly after he became president how he only gives a damn about himself. And here we are 8 years later, and that is the contrast. 8 years later, we've got a Republican nominee for president who only cares about himself. And I want to remind you all, the greatest example of that, 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, he loses an election. But he can't put the country first. He can't put our democracy first. He's the only president in the history of this country who lost an election and refused to accept the result. And oh, by the way, he's promised and pledged to do the same damn thing this time around. We all here should really have great hope. I have spent every day the past 2 months traveling to every battleground state. We've been in Pennsylvania now about 9, 10 times. I love it here, by the way. Great state. And in every state I go into, in every single state I go into, I get Republicans and independents who come up to me and tug me me by the arm and say, Joe, I'm with her, I'm going to vote for her, I can't say anything publicly. And they get an embrace, they get a high five. There's something going on around the country right now that the country first. There's something going on around the country this year that the experts and the pollsters are not picking up. There is a silent movement of people that are going to do the right thing in 1 week, and they're going to put their country first. I am here primarily not to give a speech, but to introduce someone who knows a thing or two about what it takes to lead the country. President Clinton set an example his entire presidency by reaching across the aisle and finding compromises to get things done for the American people. I may have disagreed with him a bit back in the day, but Bill Clinton never cared about whether you were a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. He wanted to get stuff done. He understood, as Kamala Harris understands, Bill Clinton understood he was the president for all Americans. And we know that Vice President Harris shares that understanding. Vice President Harris, like President Clinton, has promised to be the president for all Americans, and she will always put our country and the Constitution first. This is why so many of us, Republicans and independents, have stepped forward in the public square and said we're with her and we're supporting her. We understand. This may be the biggest understatement I've ever said. We understand that it's time to turn the page from Donald Trump. Hey, and put our country first and move forward. Our special guest, a man who needs no introduction, he has spent his long career in public service, always working to make life better for every doggone American. Hey, please give the warmest welcome you've got to the 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Thank you, Congressman Walsh. Thank you for being here, and thank you for putting country first. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis. I have a hunch this may not be the last job he ever holds. Mayor Janakowicz, to the County Democratic Chair, Castro, County Chair Montgomery, and David Thornburg, thank you for coming. I served with your father, and I'm very grateful that you're here. I want to thank Matt Lamb, the Vital Works Board member, for hosting us and promoting the arts in Johnstown. That has been great. Johnny Erder, thank you for being here. I thought that I would forget and miss the introduction because I wanted to buy something for everybody in my family. And Esther, thank you for she's still got my 1992 jacket on. I first learned about Johnstown when I was in college, and a woman that I went out with for 2.5 years is still a very good friend of mine, and her kids are. Her roommate was a woman named Julia Chiodo from Johnstown. Your relative, your cousin. And I thought there was something in the water here. I always go to my reunions if I can. And when she was 70, she still looked 40. And I thought, besides being resentful, I thought there must be something in the water here. Look, I'm now 78. I'm almost as old as Donald Trump. And I want to cut to the chase. The only thing I'm running for is my grandchildren's future. But I remember when I first came to Pennsylvania, I just loved it. And a lot of the rural parts of this state looked an awful lot like Arkansas where I grew up. And I asked everybody to vote for me. Democrats, Republicans, Independents. And I tried, when president, to treat everybody with respect. It matters, I think. So the first thing I want to say is I have to make some mention of what happened last night in Madison Square Garden, which we've all read about. And one of the great honors of being president is being the commander-in-chief of our armed forces. Puerto Ricans are among the most likely people to serve in our military and put their lives on the line. They are Americans. And so I'd like to say that for just this one day, we're all Puerto Ricans. And at the heart of all this is a debate about what kind of tribalism we're going to practice. Look, we're all tribal, right? There probably aren't very many Ohio State supporters in this crowd. We're tribal. We've got the World Series going on, and I keep praying the Yankees will come back. But it seems unlikely. Why are we excited about these things? Because we like competition, but we want it to be fair. And to be fair, we all have to live under the same set of rules. Yeah, the refs occasionally make a bad call. The umpires occasionally miss a strike or a ball. But they're trying to make sure we're living under the same set of rules. I have a brother-in-law still living in Florida, and my late father-in-law both played football for Penn State. So I always But that's not what Trump believes. He believes there's one set of rules for him and his crowd, and another set for everybody else. He believes that if you say yes, master, to everything he says, you're really straight and on the level. And if you disagree with him one time, you belong in the garbage heap of history. And this is a big deal. I remember the first week I was president, and I was the second youngest person ever elected and the third youngest to serve. So I had a lot of young staff members, and they were brilliant and earnest and they meant well, but there's some things you just have to live a while to know. And I got them all in the Oval Office. I packed them in. They could hardly move. And I said, look, if any of you ever comes in here and tells me what you think I want to hear when we're discussing something important, I might as well run this place with a computer. Because diverse groups with diverse attitudes and different experiences make better decisions than homogenous groups who all mean And that goes way beyond. It's not about I wind up not agreeing, nobody will ever be iced out. Nobody will ever be fired. Nobody will ever be shamed. And if you can't live with the decision I make, the honorable thing to do is to resign. And if you do, I will praise you and give you the best recommendation you could ever get. Because nobody's right all the time, and a broken clock is right twice a day. And all of us people who are on the level, we spend every day trying to get as far away from being right only twice. No one will ever be right all the time. And when we accept all that, we build the greatest country in the history of the world. And I think that's why this thing about Puerto Rico struck me so hard. I've worked there. I've seen the people there. I spent an enormous amount of time since I was president working there, including after those awful storms in 2017. All the other living presidents joined the first President Bush not long before he passed away down in his library in Texas A&M. And we had a big fundraiser for all the places that have been hit by the storms that year. And one reason Puerto Rico and the American Virgin Islands, also part of our country, were in such tough shape is they were the third hit after, I don't know if you all remember this, after Texas and after Florida. They were really hard hit. But those presidents, all of us agreed that we had to give some of the money that we'd raised to the Virgin Islands and to Puerto Rico. And I was already down there working. I'm telling you, you can see these people, these older people, still wearing their military uniforms and their caps, and the stories they had of being wounded, losing friends, and how proud they were that they got served. We gotta stop this. We have got to stop. If we raised our kids to behave that way, they'd all have a stint in reform school before they ever got out into the real world. Here's who you should look out for looking down on. Here's who you should dehumanize. So, one of the reasons that I want Kamala Harris to be president is that she has already proved that she will make an overt, explicit outreach to people who don't even agree with her, which is one of the reasons the Congress is sitting on this stage, too. We're the best positioned country in the world for the 21st century. The only challenge we have now is that our birth rate, even in heavily Catholic areas, is below replacement. And by the way, this happens in every country. As education level rises, more women are given opportunities in the workforce or have to work to help support the families, the birth rate drops. There's not a single exception on earth. And so you have to decide what to do about that. Immigrants have made all the difference in America. Now, what the problem is, and I'm going to just start with this, and I'll tell you very briefly why, as a citizen, I'm for Harris. I know her, I know President Trump quite well, and I'm fairly familiar with the job. So, let's talk about immigration. President Lyndon Johnson, when the Cold War was still raising, signed a bill that had bipartisan support, which said that if you're an immigrant, you show up at our borders with a reasonable threat to your own safety or the safety of your children, then you have a right to, in effect, jump the line and come here and within a couple of months get a permit to go to work. But you can't jump the line on citizenship. That is, if somebody came here through the regular system and were trying to become a citizen, you couldn't go ahead of them on that. But we didn't want you to get killed. And at the time, a lot of the countries south of us were dictatorships that were either sympathetic with international communism or running their operations like it. So Johnson signed the law. We all used it. Everybody who served earlier. Once there was a horrible hurricane that wrecked a lot of Central America. And there's still Nicaraguans, for example, and Guatemalans living and working in this country because they qualified. It was fine. And then Ronald Reagan, bless his heart, worked with Tip O'Neill, the Democratic speaker, and they passed an immigration reform bill in 1983 that gave people who'd been here for several years a quicker path to citizenship. But it was built to handle 400,000 people a year. Okay, go to the last 10 years or so. There has been so much upheaval on every continent that there have been more refugees crossing borders than at any time since World War II. And sometimes we have 1 million people, sometimes 1.5 million people show up. There's not a person in this audience that could run a system built to handle 400,000 and do the interviews, do the vets, the living. People get through the cracks because there's not enough places for people to live down on the border. And I'm not talking about luxury, it's clean. And it's even led to families and children being separated. So Americans have a right to say, you know, we're running a risk here. We're not doing the kind of background checks we need to do. We're going to make some mistakes. And we still have this law, which most of us like in principle, but in practice it's hard. So, the Vice President and President Biden went before to the Congress and starting in the Senate and told the Republican senators who cared about this, we need to fix this problem. And you write it. And tell us how many people you think we can take a month before we stop. Because we've got all this backlog to clean up. And you have a right to an orderly border and to have people properly vetted. But we don't want to turn our backs on people who are terrified. And so we need to build enough housing along the border so that we can keep families together. If you let us do that and hire the people necessary to do the vetting, we'll let you set the monthly quota. And they said, fine. Then what happened? Donald Trump said, you can't do that. My whole deal is based on division. I need problems. I don't need solutions. I need people torn up and upset. I need people resenting their neighbors. And that's a big reason that he's here. There are a lot of good people like the Republican Party in Congress that basically joined because they wanted to help people solve problems, and they had a different philosophy about what the best way to do it was. And all of a sudden, coalition of the Democrats. Crazy to spend your money. All that stuff they say. So, if you want to bring America back together, you have to support Kamala Harris. And, you know, this is not a speech. I'm just talking to you. I've been out there. I've been with lots of people. And it's amazing the number of people who have listened to Donald Trump and said, look, you may not like me and how I do things, but you have to vote for me because you had good years when I was president. Until COVID came along. And he sort of leaves things out. He's good at leaving things out. But it is true that we had two pretty good years, his first 2 years. What people don't say is that he inherited the recovery that Barack Obama his first 2 years were the finishing of a dramatic recovery. So he told everybody in 2016, I was out there then too, how terrible the economy was. And we were creating 8 million jobs a year. And then it slowed down a little in his first 2 years, but it was still acceptable. But what happened? What he's betting on today. What happened was, when he got in, people finally started to feel it. What had happened in the previous 2 to 3 years. And one of the things that all of you taught me when I was president is there's a big difference in making a change and have people feeling. And when you've had something like we've had deficit spending since 1969 when I became president. And I said, I promised you I'd fix this, and I've got to because it's killing middle class incomes. Interest rates are too high. We're not producing enough jobs. It's really hurting us. We've got to do this. But it's going to be like going to the dentist without painkillers. Because we're going to have to raise taxes a little bit, and we're going to have to cut spending. And I'll do my best to minimize the damage, but we have got to get a hold of this thing. And by the time we had the midterms, everybody had felt the pain, and they didn't yet believe that it was working. It took 3 full years before a majority would say, yeah, this is working. So I literally for years woke up in a cold sweat thinking about the people who lost their jobs in the Congress to help save America's economy and modernize it. And I got the benefits. I had a pretty easy re-election. And you guys were part of it, and I'm very grateful. But so that's where we are. And Trump's making another bet this time. He's betting that his ability to claim credit or place blame for every big event, that he'll strike gold again. And so look what's happened under the Biden-Harris administration. Like Trump, Biden promises a big infrastructure bill. Unlike Trump, he delivered one. There are 60,000 projects underway now. There'll soon be 100,000. A lot of people haven't felt it yet. All the roads, all the bridges, all the affordable broadband in rural America. And so Trump woke up and said, yesterday was sunny and pretty. I did that. Today it's so cloudy. If I were president, this never would have happened. I mean, it's great. You know, so he's thinking we can, when our ship comes in, he's going to say, you know, he steered it. In upstate New York, in a predominantly Republican area, outside Syracuse, got the biggest of all the new chip plants. And it's going to produce 60,000 jobs. I saw a map today which showed that there have actually been more projects in red places than blue ones. But that's not the point. The point is we're trying to build this country together and bring it back together. And one thing President Biden's done since he's not a candidate, that I love this, because a lot of the people who voted against all these bills, you know, they show up at the ribbon cuttings and they claim credit. And most of the time we don't know how our members vote. So they just publish every time there's a dedication, they publish in the local paper whether the congressman there voted for it or not. And you're entitled to know that. But the point is, the cost of living is a problem. It's a problem everywhere. It happened because of COVID. And there's some overhang from the big crash in 2008. I'll give you, it's like anything else. If there's a lot of demand for something, supposedly, the local government here passed an ordinance that everybody had to get out of their cars and ride scooters. And there was only 100 available scooters. So the demand's way up here and the supply's way down here. What do you think's going to happen with the price of scooters? It's going to go up. That's what's happening. So what is Kamala Harris supposed to do? Well, first of all, the biggest problem is in food prices for most people. Most Americans buy their foods through big chains. Smaller independent grocery stores are at the mercy of the wholesalers, who are affected by many of the pressures that happen to the big chains. So 37 states have laws against price gouging. No partisan difference in red states and blue states. Texas has one, and California has one. Kamala Harris is the only person who said, look, the only thing we can do, since we're not a price-fixing country, is to have a national price gouging law so the Justice Department can look at all this stuff. I can tell you, the grocery business is not a high-margin business, but if you've got 30 million customers, the difference in 3 and 4% profit is pretty big. And it all falls on you. So we need this. So that's the first thing she wants to do. Second problem we've got in many parts of the country is housing. I mean, it's really bad in Nevada now, because Nevada and Rhode Island were the two hardest hit states in the first crash after 2008. And since Nevada has people there all the time because of tourism, when they all dried up, a lot of young people just had to leave Nevada and couldn't make a living. So they left all these buildings that were empty. And a lot of very big banks bought them for a song and held them. And now everybody's coming back to Nevada. There's an unsustainable demand, so the price is going up. So what Kamala Harris has proposed to do is to finance 3 million new housing units and do it in a way which incentivizes the private sector to build 3 million more. And to help people with their down payments. That's something we've never done before. Now, even if you don't get one here, it'll drive down the price that would otherwise be cost. It's a practical thing. Donald Trump hasn't done either one of those. The third big problem we've got is healthcare expenses. And this administration had the regulatory authority to develop a $2,000 a year cap on out-of-pocket expenses for people on Medicare. and the $35 a month cap on interest. So her position is maintain it and extend it to younger people with economic limits. We need it. Their position is we got to repeal that. It's a clear choice. I mean, they think it's better to do what the drug companies want. And fourth thing is energy. And Pennsylvania knows a lot about that. And you produce an enormous amount of natural gas now. It's interesting since you also had America's first oil well back in the 1830s. And I know a lot about it because when I was governor, we started fracking and produced an enormous amount of gas. But it was very interesting. When I was a governor, there was no partisan difference on this. That is, the Democrats wanted to do it, and the Republicans believed we should have very strong regulations to prevent the escape of methane, to build the pipes right, to build the connections right, to cover it. They said, this is dangerous if we don't do this right. We can't get carried away with the money and we forget the safety. So her position is all of the above. We're producing more energy than we consume in America for the first time since the 1950s. And it's going to be a godsend for us, but we have to do it right. One went to the big oil companies and said, I promise you I will repeal everything they've done to support solar and wind, and I saw the windmills when I was coming down the road. Solar and wind and geothermal and energy efficiency, I'll get rid of all of it. And we'll replace it with oil and coal, which we won't do, which we literally physically can't do. So he said, but I'll only do it if you give me $1 billion. I think your future's worth more than $1 billion. Your children's health is worth more than $1 billion. So, the last thing I want to say, because I'm nervous about spending we can't support. Trump's plan has been evaluated, and Harris has had by 170 economists from very conservative to liberal. Guess what? His plan would cost more than twice as much as hers, because he gives billionaires and millionaires big tax cuts, including me. And I hate the idea of doing that. And hers costs less than half and will help way more than twice as many people. 100 million people will get an income tax. So, if you could help more than twice as many people for less than half the cost, you do it. That's why you ought to vote for Kamala Harris. That's it. I'm not in a speechifying mood. I want to be a Puerto Rican today. And I want to vote for somebody who will bring us together, seek out the best minds wherever they are, doesn't pretend to know everything, but believe me, is more than knowledgeable and experienced and strong enough to be president of these United States. I'll just say one thing about Governor Tim Walz, our nominee for vice president. He was a congressman in a district where he was only the second Democrat elected since 1892. And he served well, he was wildly successful. Then he got to be governor where he has been extremely competent. He worked out a paid family leave program for Minnesota. He raised the economic standards and the environmental standards of the state. He was good for the labor movement and fair to the business community. And I like him because I always feel like I'm home when I hear him talk. Folks, we're lucky to be here. But it's a confusing time. And it's hard to know where to get good information. And people have been hurt by the cost of living crisis. So I hope between now and Election Day, you can spend some time talking to your neighbors. And just tell them what I just said. And they can check it all, and it'll be validated by everybody except Fox News. But we are in this crazy place where the whole future is opening to our children and grandchildren, where we are in such good shape, where we're going to be able to do things we have never done before. And we're going to have new problems. We've got to figure out how to start over again in the Middle East. We've got to keep Ukraine from falling to the Russians. We've got to figure out how to take the good things about artificial intelligence and filter out the bad. We got big challenges too. And the idea that this election is as close as it is sad to me, but that's the way it is. And it ought to be hard to be president. It's a pretty important job. But your country needs you. Your Commonwealth needs you to take these last few days and reach out to your neighbors. The race could still go either way, and if you could just explain things to people, we'll win this thing. Thank you, and God bless.
Just stop sleeping.